Hello, I'm Charlotte, and I am going on a biblical journey of encouragement for women with a series that I am calling Who is Jesus? So that if you have a question about who Jesus is, following this series is going to help you to learn to know who he is. And I am reading out of the King James Version of the Bible. That is the version that I trust for accuracy. And so if you have a Bible, please open now to the book of Matthew and chapter 2. And if you have a Bible app, just enter Matthew 2 and you can read along with me there. So I am looking at Matthew chapter 2 in this video, and in this video we see something very important about who Jesus is. He is referred to as the King of the Jews. So let's look at verse 1 and 2. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. So, this is another reference for Jesus. We have seen his name Jesus, and we have seen him called Emmanuel, and now he's being referred to as the King of the Jews. So what we need to know here is that God the Father was the rightful King of the Jews. It was his intention to lead this group of people. He was to be their only God, and they wanted someone visible. He was not visible to them. They wanted to be like other nations that lived around them and had kings and worshiped other gods. And we find out a little bit more about what happened with God's intention to be the king of Israel, the people, the Jewish people. And if you go into your Bible, when you look in the table of contents, you'll want to look for the book called 1 Samuel. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we have the retelling of what happened when Samuel, who had been a prophet of God, he had been a messenger of God, he was becoming too old to lead the people anymore. Prophets were the ones who led the people at that time, and he was a faithful servant of God, but he had become too old, and his sons were corrupt. So to have them as successors was just not a really good thing. So the elders of the tribes of Israel came to Samuel and said, we want a king like everybody else has. You know, you're too old, your sons are corrupt, and so it's time for us to have a king like everybody else has. And so this was a disturbing thing to Samuel, and so he prayed about it, and then God spoke to him. So I believe I did want to read out of the 1 Samuel 8. Sorry about that. I didn't make a note that I was planning to read that. But 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 7 to 20. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants, and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men, and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us and fight our battles. So they were forewarned. And as we follow along then in the history of the Jewish people, they had kings. Some of them were good, some of them were evil, some of them really obeyed God, some of them totally rebelled against him. They got taken into captivity by other kings and had to live as captives in other countries instead of the homeland that God had given them. And by the time that we read of Jesus, the people are now under the occupation of the Roman Empire. So the Roman king is living in Jerusalem and serving, and they have to serve him. So it is a significant thing that Jesus would be referred to as the King of the Jews, because God is continuing his original plan to be their king. And he made references to sending them a king through other prophets over time. And so the Jews were actually looking for this king who they called the Messiah, the anointed one that God would send, so that he would be their king and free them from slavery, from bondage, from occupation, and so on. Now, when these wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, they were asking everywhere and everyone because they couldn't exactly find the place where Jesus was. And King Herod's reaction is to find out if this is true, that there should be a king of the Jews, because that threatened him and his position. So let's go back to Matthew chapter 2, and now we're reading verses 4 to 8. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. So the chief priests and scribes that King Herod asked were quoting what the prophet Micah had said in Micah chapter 5 verse 2. You can find that in your Bible by looking through the concordance, or again, just put that into the app, Micah 5 verse 2, and then you can read that that's what the prophet said, and this was being quoted by the scribes and chief priests. So King Herod had a private consultation with the wise men under the pretense that he also wants to worship him. So let's carry on reading now from verse 9 to 12. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. So these wise men were able to find Jesus and worship him, giving him honor as a king. They recognized him as a king, even though he was just a little boy, probably about 2 years old, and they gave him the gifts that they had brought. These were real people who really lived and had found out about him as they studied the stars and constellations. They took off on a journey that probably lasted about 2 years, just so they could find this king, this special king. Now, God knew that King Herod was really plotting to kill Jesus, so he warned the wise men not to go back to tell Herod where Jesus was. And God warned Joseph by sending an angel to him in a dream. He warned him to go to Egypt to keep Jesus safe from Herod's plan. So Joseph, Mary, and Jesus stayed in Egypt until King Herod died, and it was safe to return. Now, Hosea is another prophet that we read about in the Bible, and his prophecy about Jesus was that Jesus would come out of Egypt. So in Hosea 11, verse 1, if you want to pause the video and turn in your Bible to Hosea 11:1, or in your app, open up Hosea 11:1, it says, "When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt." So that's a reference to Jesus that is documented, that we know he had been in Egypt for a time. Now, let's look at verses 19 to 23 to finish up this chapter. "But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene." God is so precise. He has things totally planned, calculated, and organized so that we can follow a thread through the entire Bible and find confirmation that Jesus really was who he said he was. And I looked for reference about what prophet exactly said what verse 23 says, but I couldn't find a specific reference. It could be because of the reference to the word Nazareth and what the word Nazareth means, and even the pronunciation of Nazareth could sound like something that was meant in some different prophecies that are available in the Bible. So I'm going to leave a link for you in the description below if you're interested in knowing more about where this could have come from, because I am not exactly sure. So thank you for joining me again. Please leave any comments or questions in the comments section. I will reply. And stay tuned for more in this series. We're going to follow the book of Matthew to find out who is Jesus. Thank you.